We're joined by Ivan Maisel on 3.com, a college sports website and perhaps the greatest college football writer
well, thank you.
of all time. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah. Wow, now I'm scared to write anything else.
You've been in this business a long, long time, and you've been through different parts of the business. Sports Illustrated, obviously ESPN, and now on 3.com. Let's start with that. You will launch in August. This is an undertaking, obviously, to say the least, but again, another way for people to digest a great game.
Yes. The guys, David, the business guys are smart. They created Rivals.com and sold it to Yahoo. Then they created 247sports.com, sold that to CBS. So this is their new venture. And they know how to do the internet. You know, they've shown they know how to do the internet. This time they want to go, we're going to be heavy on recruiting, and we've hired a terrific recruiting staff to deal with it. But we're also going to be strong on storytelling, and that's what I can do, and that's what I've done a long time. And this sport, the history of this sport and the passion of this sport is certainly what drew me to it. I grew up in Alabama, so I understand why it's important to people. And I like to tell stories, and I've been able to do that about what I love. And now, this is what the guys at On 3 wanted to do, and I was all for it.
Ivan, here it's nice to be back here in the whole community of things. How do you think that this teams will be measured about how they responded from last year's COVID and coming back? Like, how do you come out of that, and did you build on whatever mess you had to come out of?
Well, there's two things I see. One is just this overwhelming sense of gratitude of everybody here, that we're all together, and that we've all sort of, I don't know if we've come out the other end or not, and I thought Bob Bowlesby was really smart in what he said yesterday, that, we can't assume that, we're done, but if we're smart, then we'll keep moving forward. So there's that sort of feeling. And then the other thing I notice is just because everybody got to come back that wanted to come back without losing a year of eligibility, I think the game's going to be a lot better on the field this year because there's so much more experience across the board. And the teams that, Matt Campbell saying yesterday that Iowa State's going to have 25 seniors. That's astounding in this day and age. Because, the best guys are 3 years and out. And now you're going to have 25 guys that are in their fourth, fifth, or sixth year. That's a huge advantage in this sport to me for Iowa State.
You got these super seniors like you're referring to, these extra year seniors. You've got the name, image, likeness. You've got the transfer portal. It's just one thing after another. Can you think of any other time in covering college football where there's been this many moving pieces, not just with the game itself, but also above the game and the hierarchy, the decision makers?
Not really. I think you'd have to go back to, say, right after World War II, when so many guys were flooding back onto campus, and they didn't know whether to play one platoon or two platoon football, and there was that battle for so many years, and there were so many guys coming back. That's a long time ago. Yeah. So there's a lot of history that has gone by, and I think that's really one of the reasons that I wanted to keep covering college football, is because this year there's so much change happening, and I wanted to see what happens.
You talked about storytelling. Where did that come up in your childhood, or when did that become something you felt like you could do and do it the way you have?
I grew up in a storytelling family, and my father and his siblings, I remember sitting around the holiday table, and the best part for me was after dinner when they would start talking about growing up, and I grew up in Mobile, and they would talk about growing up in Mobile, and I was captivated by that, and and they told such great stories. I said to my mother one time, I wish I had been around back then, and she looked at me like, what are you, nuts? But I sort of learned the rhythm of telling a story just by sitting around my family and listening, and that's what's propelled me. And I had teachers early on that gave me confidence that I could write. And then I went to college and I wrote as much as I could for the school paper, and I just, never looked back.
Ivan Maisel on 3.com with us, longtime college football writer on Sikkim 365 Radio.
One of the things I'm sure you're excited to get back to is actually going to places this year and covering games. One of the things I've always loved about your writing is how immersive you can make the experience. If I'm reading an article about Oregon and I've never been there, I can feel like I understand, the atmosphere of this particular game in this moment, and the little, nuggets that only college football writers and people who cover know about this restaurant in that town. Is there a place that you really missed last year that you didn't get to go, or that college football fans need to go if they haven't been, even if they're not a fan of that school?
Well, the one place I did go last year, I went to an Army game. I live about 90 minutes from West Point, and I wanted to see what a game there was like with only the Corps of Cadets in attendance, and it was interesting. Now it was against Mercer, and Army just mopped up the field with them. But if you to your question specifically, if you love college football, you need to go to West Point to see a football game. It's visually it's spectacular. It's a beautiful campus. And the stadium is historic and old, and Mikey Stadium, and they shoot the cannon off when they score, and the Corps is just so into the game because it's like 3 hours on a Saturday when they can be kids again, and they don't, they're not yes sir, no sir, and going the 18-hour days that they go. So it sort of answers the same place answers both questions.
What do you think of the Big 12 this year? How do you see this conference sort of stacking up? It seems to be Oklahoma, as always, at Iowa State, and then sort of just who knows after that. What are your thoughts on the Big 12?
Which I think is good. Mm-hmm. I think there's a big sort of cluster in the middle of the conference, and we're all trying to figure out who's going to break out. And I think that's a sign of improving or improved play. That there are several teams that seem like they're on the cusp of something. Texas, obviously, a lot of talent, new coach. We'll see how that goes. But really everybody. Not Kansas. God bless Kansas. Right. But you can make a case for everybody else that there's some light there, and the fact that they do play a round-robin schedule makes it a lot more fun. We'll see. Dave
Aranda in his second year, Sikkim 365 Radio. We get to talk with him quite a bit and also cover Baylor. Do you ever run into him in the past when he was at Wisconsin or at LSU, or have you ever had a chance to sit down and get to know him much or write about him?
Well, I wrote about him, that great season 2 years ago in LSU when he was so integral to what I think is one of the best teams that ever played. That 2019 team was so good on both sides of the ball. I have not sat down with him one-on-one. The last the time in which we were preparing the 150 project, I was not completely here in 2017, 2018, 2019. I was back in 1943 and back there, but I certainly know Dave and know of him, and listening to him today I was really impressed. Baylor had so many issues last year that were no fault of his, and it didn't unnerve him. And I thought he was really eloquent today in talking about the problems that last year presented just in him getting to know his players, when he was a new coach. And it really put him in an untenable position. And the fact that they have been able over the last few months to spend more time with those guys is only going to benefit them.
With Steve Sarkisian taking over at Texas, he obviously has the weight of expectation of a school that I don't know. I mean, you just did the 150 all that stuff that you did, the history of it. I think sometimes the Texas fans maybe overestimate their own history, or
no.
They're still
breaking news.
Yeah. For him to be successful there, does he have to embrace that or ignore it?
Well, you have to embrace it. Tom Herman tried ignoring it, and we all saw what happened. Look, there's two guys that have been successful in Austin since the end of World War II, and they had the same personality, Darrell Royal and Mac Brown. And they brought all the guys that think they run the program in, put their arms around their shoulders, and made them think they were important. And that's the challenge for Sark. We know he's a brilliant offensive mind. It's dealing with all the other stuff that comes with being the coach of the Longhorns. And, Sark, one of Sark's great gifts are his people skills. What's interesting is whether that sort of Southern California chill that he's got, whether that transfers well to the Republic of Austin, and that's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, earlier you said Texas is town and a new coach, and that's kind of like been that way for about a decade now. Yeah, exactly right.
Well, we've thought, but as it turned out, I think one of Charlie's downfalls was his recruiting and his staff. And Tom thought he could succeed in Austin in spite of all that.
Right.
And when he struggled, there was nobody behind him to support him.
Yeah.
Is that one of the things you do? Is you kind of have to change person? You mentioned Southern California chill. Tom Herman is a great many things. He is not chill.
No.
And you
He's
cannot,
not a people person.
Yeah, and you can't be high strung in that city.
Well, and his feeling was, well, if I win games, it doesn't matter. And of course, he's right, but on the other hand, if you don't quite win enough, that's a nice cushion to fall back on, is people who think, I've got his back because I like him and he's good for me and he's good for my school, and he didn't put his time into that. And that was his choice, and he thought that was the right thing to do. It just didn't work out.
So I'd imagine, as long as you've covered college football, you've heard every argument for every playoff scenario, for every possible thing that could be done. So now it looks like there's some movement on the tracks. What are your thoughts on at least discussions about the expanded playoff?
Well, I'm like everybody else, Craig. I was stunned that they went from 4 to 12. I like, in theory and in practice to a degree, I liked the fact that winning a conference was not good enough to make the playoff. That there was going to be a conference champion left out. I thought that's how good you got to be in this playoff. Winning your conference isn't enough. Well, I wasn't smart enough, and neither was anybody else, to foresee what the issue would become, is that we have always had a regional sport, and that's been one of the strengths of this sport, is that people care about what happens in their locally. And the playoff, along with television, has made it a national sport. When the starting quarterbacks at Georgia, Clemson, and Alabama are all from Southern California, which is what will happen this fall, that's different. Is it worse? I'm not going to say it's worse. It's just different. And the sport's got to figure out how to keep the rich from getting richer, and so that fans don't get disengaged the way they've been disengaged the last few years, because it's the same schools. And this is their solution. I'm not smart enough to know what the problems with this solution are. I fear that for November, is playing for a seeding going to be enough? If Oklahoma and Iowa State get to the championship game on this field in December, and they're already both in the playoff, it won't be this December, but a December, and they're already in the playoff, how does that affect how they play the game? Who do they sit? Or even if it's not the championship game, if it's Thanksgiving weekend and it's what's supposed to be your rivalry game, but you're trying to protect your players. In the NFL, when Aaron Rodgers doesn't play the last game of the season to sit for the playoffs, nobody cares.
College football's not used to that.
Not used to that.
Yeah.
And is that a good thing? And are you diminishing the value of the regular season when we've all gotten used to every game is important?
Right.
Now you're saying it's not. And is getting as Bowlesby put it yesterday, as having 40 fan bases engaged in October and 25 engaged in November, trying to get those 12 spots, is that of greater value than what you may lose? I don't know. We'll find out. Yeah.
You have written about atmosphere, rivalries, the pageantry, players, whoever. But what a lot of people don't understand or maybe not know about you is you're now writing a book about your son, Max.
Yeah.
Who passed away. And you and I talked about this a little bit earlier. I lost my sister when she was very young, and people have all had things happen along the way. How difficult is that, and yet how at times maybe refreshing can that be to write about your son?
Well, obviously, it's all difficult, but that's what my life became when Max died. Max ended his life, we think, we'll never quite be sure, but in January of 2015. And, he turned 21 in January, he died in February of 15. And, I kind of figured out early on this wasn't going away, this feeling. And my challenge was, how do I live with it? And am I going to let it obviously you have to carry it with you wherever you go. It's not something, my wife says we don't do prepositions anymore. You don't get through this. You don't get over it. You just learn to carry it with you. But I feel like there were still going to be good things that happened to me in my life. A few weeks after Max died, I had a nephew get married. Well, if I don't go to the wedding because I'm crushed that Max died, then I've cheated I'm doubly cheated. And so the book's called I Keep Trying to Catch His Eye. Max was a photography major who didn't like his picture taken, and the picture on the wallpaper of my phone is of our three children, and Max is kind of looking that way. He wouldn't look at the camera. It's really about my relationship with him, what happened when he died, and then how I've kind of learned to channel my grief. And for me, what helped me tremendously is once I realized that the depth of my grief was equal to the depth of my love for him, and then I kind of thought, well, that just means this grief is really just love. It's just in a different form. And I thought that message helped me, and I'm hoping in explaining what happened to us and that it will make people less scared of the grieving, less scared of grief, less scared of death. It's something we all are going to have to deal with at some point, and less scared of mental illness. There's plenty of things that we misread and that I misread pertaining to Max, and
hopefully this book will help somebody. There's a lot of discussion about that this day and age. Athletes have come out with it. Dave Aranda talked about it at the beginning today, which I thought was a pretty sharp, pretty smart, pretty obviously focused on what everyone else has dealt with as well. And so, again, good luck with that.
Thank you. It's the publication date's October 26th. It's published by Hachette. You can pre-order it now. I thought what Dave said, really hit home for me because it's the same age group.
Yep,
and these kids are so vulnerable at this point, and last year was so hard on all of them.
Yeah.
And another reason that this year is going to be better.
Ivan, great to have you, man. We appreciate it. Good luck with On3.com as well. If you're a part of it, it's going to be good. And the other guys that have done what they've done as well. Ivan Maisel, Hall of Fame writer, On3.com. This is Sikkim 365 Radio.